and the first word that comes to mind is megalomania. I mean, I think he liked having the power.
He represented the average Chinese person.
He has the genius in him and the monster.
The leadership of Chinese Communist Mao Tse Tung caused almost all of China to change. The legacy and the impact of what he did turned China into a full communist nation. During this change, nearly all of China's history was destroyed. Because of these actions, China's lifestyle would never be the same.
However, before all this chaos, Mao Zedong never thought he would lead a revolution.
Mao Zedong was born on December 26, 1893, in Shaoshan, China. This part of China was in the Hunan province. Mao grew up in one of China's many peasant families. However, his family was on the richer side.
When he was 13, Mao left school to work on his family farm.
Mao decided he wasn't built for labor, so he went back to finish his elementary learning 3 years later. He went to school training in the Hunanese capital, Changsha. Mao was exposed to two people who will impact him and China, Dinchen Tusu and librarian Li Ta-Chao. These men would later become the founders of the Chinese Communist Party.
Mao had many silent rebellions, like cutting what was called a queue. A queue was when a man such as Mao grew out his hair and braided it down his back. Cutting it was a sign of disobedience.
The peasants of China had always endured hardships, ever since the rule of cruel Empress Dowager Cixi, who imposed unfair laws on the peasants, like annual taxes on grain.
Come 1910, riots broke out, but none succeeded, and usually ended up with many people dead. The rebels needed someone to lead them to victory.
This was when Mao knew what he had to do. The Revolutionary Army was no help. So in 1921, he founded the Chinese Communist Party. Mao later led a movement to take shelter in the caves of a town called Yan'an. To get there, they marched from towns in eastern China.
This expedition is also known as the Long March. On October 16, 1934, Mao led his Red Army to cover more than 4,000 miles of land in 1 year.
He did rally people. There's no question a lot of people rallied behind his leadership. He kept his group together through some very, very trying times in the 1920s and the 1930s. The Long March, when they go all the way to Western China to preserve the communist revolution. He did inspire people.
They needed the caves as a strategic and tactical position in both the war against Japan, who invaded China in 1931, and the Kuomintang. The Kuomintang was a Chinese political party founded by Sun Yat-sen and was then later led by Chiang Kai-shek.
Japan was a force to be reckoned with, teamed up with Germany's Nazi Party and the Italian fascist government.
The Chinese thought they would never see freedom from Japan until both of China's political parties went against the Japanese. Chiang Kai-shek was a nemesis in Mao Zedong's eyes, but knew that he could only go so far with the Japanese ruling.
Many communist forces fought the Japanese with the nationalists.
One effort to stop the Japanese advance was blowing up the dikes on the Yellow River.
While it did slow the Japanese, innumerable amounts of civilians were wounded or killed.
Japan ruled China until 1945.
With the end of World War II in Europe, the summer of 1945, the Nazis were defeated, causing Japan to be on its own for the rest of the Pacific War.
In fall of 1945, the U.S. dropped two of the newest weapons of war, the atomic bombs. However, war was not over in China. The Civil War still raged on.
A new revolution sparked in China.
Mao Zedong led China's Red Army, which consisted of 75% laborers and 25% miners. At this time, over 80% of China's population were peasants like these.
The communists were up against the Kuomintang, led by Chiang Kai-shek.
Mao Zedong's army was also known as the CCP, which stood for the Chinese Communist Party. His army used guerrilla warfare often, as it caused less casualties for the CCP and more for the Kuomintang.
Along with these good tactics, Mao was educated well and made for an excellent strategic leader. He once said, "Fight no battle you are not sure of winning."
The Long March, as stated before, kept the CCP in the caves of Yan'an. However, on March 18, 1947, the Kuomintang bombed the entire city.
The communists fled the city, but didn't give up. More battles destroyed lives, city, and spirit. The morale of the Kuomintang was slowly fading, and the communists kept winning more and more fights. More and more often, the communists took over the Kuomintang-ruled towns and cities.
The communists took cities ranging from Shanghai to Guangzhou.
It wasn't until 1949 that the communists had taken over China and forced Chiang Kai-shek to resign. The communists made Beijing the new seat of the Central Committee, led by Mao as well.
Mao gave his and China's most memorable and life-changing speech in Tiananmen Square, Beijing. This is what he said.
After Mao Zedong gave his famous speech in 1949, the revolution was considered to be done and over with.
What he accomplished was, honestly, in a lot of ways, it sets China on the course to become the successful nation that they are today, and certainly brought them out of a very difficult situation post-World War II, a China that was struggling.
After the communists take over, Chairman Mao wanted to see some changes.
But the CCP didn't want to change the industry and agriculture of China.
One change that they decided that was necessary was women's rights. Mao Zedong once said women hold up half the sky.
Sometimes when a baby was born, they would just kill or abandon it instead of putting the child up for adoption. The communists banned this. A primary education was formed, which helped kids learn basic academics.
Trying to start China's country anew, Mao destroyed nearly all of China's history and culture. This major act of aggression caused one of China's turning point moments in history, the Great Proletarian and Cultural Revolution, also known as the Cultural Revolution.
The Cultural Revolution started in 1966 and was led by Mao's third wife, Zhang Qing. She and 3 others formed what they called the Gang of Four.
They wanted the Cultural Revolution to get rid of the 4 olds, which consisted of old ideas, cultures, customs, and habits.
A propaganda poster for the Cultural Revolution reads, "Destroy the old world, forge the new."
Schools were shut down, the CCP hunted down capitalists, and violence spreaded everywhere.
Intellectuals and teachers were considered the new enemies of China.
These events caused major problems inside China. Because when you had the Cultural Revolution and the Great Step Forward, oftentimes these were cultural upheavals. It really upset the entire country. For example, the Cultural Revolution, you would take people who were scientists or people who were college professors, and you would say, you need to learn humility. You need to learn what it's like to be a peasant. And they would send them to work on peasant farms.
By the early 1970s, China's economy was ruined. The streets of China reeked with poverty due to the lack of jobs.
It wasn't until communist leader Deng Xiaoping came into power that the Cultural Revolution slowed down to an ending.
Another obvious end to the endeavor was Mao Zedong getting a disease known as Parkinson's disease, a disorder in the brain that causes difficulties with movement and coordination.
Mao Zedong died of this on September 9th, 1976.
The people in China revere Mao. Pictures and paintings everywhere you go in China, leaving a legacy no one can miss.
Thank you for watching our documentary.
We hoped you enjoyed. Also, if you ever go to China, think about the economy and the ideas of the country have changed due to Mao Zedong's leadership, giving a legacy of either beautiful change or an endless bloodshed.